the rest of the meeting for Q&A. So hello again, everyone. My name is Sydney McCleary. I'm the coordinator for the Homeless Contribution Tax Credit Program. Brianne is still out with her beautiful new baby girl. Got an updated picture the other day. She's gorgeous. So happy that Brianne is out and about hanging out with her family. I do have our OHI program assistant, Michael Menning, with me today. He's going to be helping with monitoring the chat and making sure people are let in. So it's not just me in here from OHI to assist with all of you. All right, so today's agenda, again, please put your name and organization in the chat to help us with follow-up conversations. Today we'll be going over some deadline reminders, the late submission form, and of course, as always, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So, big reminders for upcoming deadlines. Biggest thing, if you have not submitted your annual report yet, and you received an extension for that from the 15th, then tomorrow, by end of day, January 25th, is the final extension deadline to submit your reports. That goes for anything pulled from HMIS or CAFE, or if you need to or complete the form on Access.gov, then please make sure that those are submitted so that we have time to review by our required deadline as well. If you have any questions on the report, please reach out. I'm happy to help. I'd rather walk you through everything step by step than for you to spin your wheels, just like I always say. January 31st, we are a week out from wrapping up our first year. Kind of crazy that we are approaching this deadline already. So please make sure that all of your 2023 contributions are submitted into Salesforce by January 31st. If you are an organization that uses the donor submission portal, whether that's for some of your donors or for all of your donors, please keep in mind that that portal will close and will not work for 2023 contributions after that January 31st date. So make sure you're nudging your donors. Otherwise, if it does need to be submitted, which we'll go over soon, it will need to be submitted by you. February 1st is when that late submission form, so that anything that was not submitted by the end of this month, the late submission form will open, and we'll go over what that looks like, how you'll use it right after this. And all quarterly and annual certificates will be available. So everybody who's in quarterly and annual, you see that all of your contributions are in pending status right now. Those should all automatically shift to approved on February 1st. And once those are approved, then what generates the tax credit certificate. And everything that's in there for the quarter or for the year will be put onto one certificate, depending on your frequency. So keep an eye out for that change. By February 15th, by statute, all of these certificates must be distributed to their donors. So keep in mind, again, especially if you're that quarterly or annual frequency, you have those solid 2 weeks to get all certificates out to meet that statute deadline. All right, so the late submission form. I know as we've been wrapping up, we've been getting a lot of questions about what's going to happen if I don't meet the January 31st deadline. Will donors still be able to ask for the tax credit if they didn't know that they wanted it before the deadline? All the answers to that are yes. Everything is good. We have this workaround in place to try to make sure that you and your donors have no penalties for something being late or them not knowing that they wanted a tax credit, anything like that. We do just have to keep up with Salesforce, of course. We have to make sure that things are structured by the tax year still. So that late submission form will be ready morning of February 1st for you all to access. Again, reasons why we're using it. you know, when you go to file your taxes, sometimes you're thinking, you don't have to think things through all the way May of the year prior, and you're going to file in April, and you're like, oh, but I donated to this organization. They say that they have HCTC. I never got a tax credit certificate. Now I would like that. Donors shouldn't be penalized for thinking that way and not thinking about what forms they need until they're going to file their taxes. So if a taxpayer reaches out to you and they're like, hey, I want my tax credit certificate, totally fine. That's what this late submission form is for. If you have a contribution that when you're going through your contribution audit that I send you and you're like, oh no, I missed John Smith's contribution from October, that's okay too. That's another thing that should not be penalized. And so that's why we have this form in place as well. You can still submit that and the donor can still receive that certificate. Or if you have a certificate that's already out there, but then after January 31st, you realize that there's an edit that needs to be made, so you have to revoke that certificate and resubmit. That's why this is available too. So whatever the reason may be, we have this in place. It's like a safety net, but that's what it should be used for, is a safety net. So please keep that January 31st deadline in mind, because that is still the required deadline. This is a just in case kind of form. Some things to keep in mind about the form is that donors do not have access to this. This will only be available on your nonprofit portal. So you or any of your staff that have access to Salesforce, those are the folks that will be able to access this. Donors who use the donor submission form cannot submit a 2023 contribution after January 31st. Since this is only available for nonprofit staff members, again, for those organizations who rely on a lot of donor submissions or solely donor submissions, if it's submitted after the deadline, you will need to collect all of the information, including the social security number, because it needs to be entered by you. So that's a good thing to use to potentially nudge taxpayers to entering their contributions, but also to keep in mind as the years go on with planning on when submitting the contributions. This form will be on the home page rather than the contributions page. Right now, you're all used to clicking on the contributions tab at the top and then entering new contribution. We've put this late submission form on the home page just to keep them separate, to make a very direct decision of, yes, I'm going to submit a late form because that's what I need to do. And so that there's no mistakes or wobbles made by keeping them on the same page. For any contribution submitted on the late submission form, that will produce an immediate certificate, regardless of your organization's frequency. So even if you're quarterly or annual, if you're using this unique form, you will automatically get a certificate available. And I'll show you what that looks like. Because just in the same reasoning of, if a taxpayer is reaching out to get a certificate for this year to file with their taxes, we want that certificate available for them right away. If you are submitting a late contribution in the normal contributions form, so you go to the contribution tab, click new contribution, and it's February 2nd, but you're trying to enter for a 2023 contribution, then a certificate will not be created. Salesforce will automatically decline that contribution, and it'll say in the reasoning like, oh, it's a late submission, something along those lines. So just keep that in mind, be intentional with where you're entering it. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll show you what that looks like. So here's a glimpse. This is basically our practice Salesforce. So you will not see this when you log into Salesforce yet. That's why it looks a little bit different, but this will look basically the same once it's pushed to what you can see. So I logged into Salesforce and this is my home page. You'll see late contribution submission form. and then how to submit 2023 contributions after the deadline, a whole big blurb that goes over basically everything that we just went over. And then, as always, the links are in blue. So you'll click the late contribution form down here, and it'll pull up what you're very used to seeing. It looks exactly the same, but just know it is separate. So go to enter the contribution, the tax year, make sure you're entering 2023. For this one, since 2023 isn't an old tax year yet, I'll say that it's in 2022. 150, and then make sure that you are selecting the correct year and month and date when you are entering the actual contribution. So making sure you're going back to 2023 or 2022 in this case. Next, and then you'll see it's all the same. Going through late form testing, you still have the summary at the very end, and submit. And it says, all right, your submission has been created successfully. You can either view the contribution from here, which is kind of nice to just be able to go directly to it, or as always, going to your contributions tab. From there, when you scroll down, the only thing that you'll notice is different is that there's this is late section now, and a check mark. That is just to make sure it's basically triggering an immediate certificate regardless of your organization's frequency. Everything still looks the same. It will come up as immediately approved because it's submitted by you and the nonprofit. And then when you go to your tax certificates tab, again, this is mostly for folks who are not on immediate frequency, so you know what to see. You'll see that there's immediately a tax credit available. You can click on that, and that all looks exactly the same as well. Ready to send via email or print and view the PDF. But again, it really is all the same, just unique in where you are going to submit this and after what date. So yeah, so that is our very quick run through of the late submission form. Do we have any questions on this form before we jump into questions about anything else? Okay, everyone's looking like it seems pretty straightforward. Oh, awesome. Julie, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. My question is, I've had people like in September contact us and say, hey, will it still be available then for in September of 2024 for a donation in November of 2023?
Yes. So I think the final extension by like revenue and everybody for filing your taxes this year is October 16th. And so the form will be open until at least that date. In case you have somebody reach out on literally the final day that they could file their taxes with an extension. So yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, again, we want to make sure that the donors are not penalized for getting these extensions or not thinking about it or anything like that. Any other questions about this form? Awesome. With that, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.